All right, what's up, guys? Jackson Abe here today, and today I wanted to talk to you guys why I like to utilize bands so much for my athletes. Um, I had a couple people reach out. I posted a video on my Instagram a few weeks ago, and just pretty much just a collage of all the training that the high school athletes that I specifically work with and I did over the summer, and I think it turned out really well. Um, but I had a couple people ask why so many of our videos or movements contain, the utilization of bands. And so I've talked about, in the conjugate method videos and stuff like that before about accommodating resistance, bands and chains, things of those nature. Um, Chains are just a little more, not harder to come by, but just to get enough resistance, you need a shit ton of chain. Um, and so sometimes it's just a pain in the ass to drag those around. And the bands are much easier. They fit in my backpack, so I would just leave them in my backpack and then carry them into the gym, and then we'd be ready to go. Whereas I'd probably have to like drag the chains into the gym. So that's one reason. But really, why I like utilizing bands is because bands have a specific purpose. That you can utilize for different populations, different reasons. And these are the reasons why I like using them for athletes. So we're going to dive into that. The main reason is because bands are perceived more as like an active resistance. They are trying to return back to their normal shape. So it's kind of like a rubber band. You can pull it back really far. It might snap, but eventually it wants to return back to its normal form. Even when we release it, it may go a great distance, but it wants to return back to its normal form, and that's what the bands are trying to do. So it's constantly trying to pull the bar back down. And why this is great for athletes is because when we're in the gym, um, a lot of movements, bench, squat, all movements have um, a plane of motion that is referred to as a mechanical advantage, to where think of our bench, if we're 85% of the way up, it's really easy to finish the lock out of the bench rather than getting it off of our chest, right? Same with the squat. That's why a lot of people squat high, because it's much easier to move here than it is all the way down to the floor. And coming out of the hole is typically the hardest part for people. So we all have this mechanical advantage of every movement, even basic curl. It's harder to get the bar up to here than it is the top end of the movement. It's just called mechanical advantage because we have the advantage over the weight. Now, if the weight's obviously more than we can handle, there is going to be no such thing as the mechanical advantage because we're just going to get folded by the weight. Um, but in this sense, with the active resistance, both bands and chains, they pretty much get rid of that mechanical advantage plane of motion that we reach at some point in our lifts, because the resistance is continuing to stack as the movement progresses. So think of right off of a box, usually the hardest part of the squat is going to be out of that hole. Okay, so with the bands, we have to beat the bands. That's why that quote's in air quotes. That's what I always tell the athletes. You got to beat the bands. And why this is so beneficial is because it builds the explosiveness and the starting strength, not only of those movements, but it teaches them how to, if, for example, my guys are all football players, it teaches us how to fire off the ball a little bit faster, get out of our stance, get out of our, starting position, stuff like that. So utilizing the bands specifically has transfer over to those specific things in their sport. So without even having to necessarily practice, in their stance or getting off the ball, reacting to things like that, we can just throw some bands on stuff, and it's going to build this up that then can transfer to the field of play. Um, and the second point kind of highlights the whole mechanical advantage portion of what I was just talking about, and how when we get to certain parts of, say, a bench or a squat, where I said that like way it's easier towards the top end of those movements, it's much easier to just slow down and not try as hard, because sometimes in our mind we have it built up like, oh, I got the rest of this. Well, with the bands, like I said, it's trying to actively pull you back down. You have to finish through the whole range of motion of that movement. You can't let up, otherwise the bands are going to pull you straight back down. And this teaches them when they're in sport and they're facing a resistance, say a D lineman taking on a block, they can fight through that resistance the entire time because they're used to overcoming some form of active resistance in their training. So it's nothing new to them when they get on the field. They feel that resistance, and instead of their bodies going and shutting down, they're able to continue to fight back and eventually potentially overpower their opponent, depending on leverages, strength, et cetera, et cetera. So these are the main reasons why I like using bands with the athletes. I think, and they also enjoy it. That's another reason. As long as your athletes are enjoying training, that's going to be a part of it, because it's going to be easier to build that buy-in with them, because they're going to enjoy that aspect of training. You can cater the band tension in various different ways. It also helps utilize, the loading that you're going to be doing for that day. If you're using a shit ton of band tension, the weights are probably going to be a little bit lower. That's on the actual barbell. If the band tension is a little bit lighter, there's still that tension that they have to fight through, but we can put a little bit more weight on the actual bar itself. And so it's just different parameters for loading and stuff like that, that we can control as coaches, and monitor, their progression through things and stuff like that. And so these are the main reasons why I like using bands for my athletes specifically. Like I said, there's different uses of the bands for different populations, different goals, and stuff like that. This is why I like using them for my athletes specifically that play football, but even regardless if you're a volleyball player, a basketball player, baseball, I think I said softball, soccer, whatever, you can utilize bands in the sense to essentially build the same qualities. I'm just providing examples for football players because that's primarily who I'm working with at the moment. But the bands are great for all athletes in a sense because of all of these things of nature. All the athletes in some sense are going to have some form of resistance in their sport, and if they don't, then they're going to at least be able to be much more explosive, be able to accelerate a little bit faster, and if they do happen to come across some resistance, they're going to be able to fight through it. So these are the reasons why I like using the band so much. So hopefully those answered some questions that I received in my DMs. But I appreciate you guys for shooting me those questions because it allowed me the opportunity to make this video. It gave me a great idea to just get some thoughts down. And like I said, just get this video out there for you guys. So I hope you guys all got some good takeaways from this. I appreciate all your guys' support. Thank you for tuning into the page. Don't forget to subscribe. Share this video. Check out the Instagram at Abe_strength. Check out the Train Heroic page. The link's going to be in my Instagram bio. I have a few ebooks out as well, so feel free to check those out. They're free to download. Also follow the link in my Instagram bio. That'll take you to everything that you need. Again, appreciate all your guys' support. Get out there today. Be great.